Okay, welcome to the opening episode of Pitches and Politics, a brand new podcast by myself, Scott Driver, and John O'Lee. This podcast we're going to cover a range of political talk and conversation with a mixture of football and sports chat as well, and everything else in between. We are joined on our opening episode by MP Ben Bradley. Thank you for joining us.
No worries.
Just to sort of break the ice and sort of before we get into the serious chat, let's talk a little bit about football and specifically teams in the East Midlands and Nottingham Forest. I'll begin with. I've read in some of the research we've done on you that you used to play in goalkeeper yourself. Is that true?
Do occasionally still for the Parliament team down here.
Brilliant.
We had a game at conference recently. We play every year against the journalists, which is always good fun.
Amazing.
Usually get battered by the journalists. MPs are not known for their fitness necessarily, but that's always good fun. Always been a bit of a sports nut, to be honest, and obviously got your Forest jumper on. I'm a season ticket holder as well. So
brilliant. Yeah, I did actually see you. I haven't mentioned this yet, but I caught you at Wembley at the playoff final.
Right.
Just on your way out, you were with your lad, and he had his Forest shirt on, and that to me is still one of the best days of my life. That
amazing.
playoff final.
I tell you what, it needed to happen because we had obviously MP for Mansfield. Mansfield were there the day before, and it was awful.
Yeah.
Absolutely, came down for the weekend. We went to both games, and they were 2-0 down. Man sent off after 20 minutes, and it was just over. And we had tears from the owners and all sorts. It was horrendous. So we needed a massive day on the Sunday. So I've been a Forest fan since I was a kid, and I just literally stood staring out over the pitch for about 40 minutes afterwards. Me and my eldest, who was 9. Didn't know what to do with that. It was amazing.
It was so strange. I don't know about you, but I just had a good feeling going into that game as well. And I normally wouldn't with Forest in playoffs after sort of the failures under Billy Davis and stuff like that in recent times and stuff. I just would never really normally be that confident, but there was something about that game, like just on the journey down to Wembley and everything, just felt like, it's our day today.
Yeah, you need to be a Bolton fan with that. Used to losing every day and nearly going extinct. But yeah,
We had some Wembley success last season.
we did, and we went.
Yeah. John's Trophy final.
It was great.
Hooray.
A massive victory.
No. But no, it's superb. Obviously, you play hockey as well, and obviously I'm aware you play hockey. You've been really involved in hockey locally. But let's get to the real reason why I'm here today, because I'm here to talk politics. You're obviously, I think, full disclosure, you are my boss at the county council, so I am on best behaviour. But it's been really interesting. I was thinking last night when we first met, in a car park in Mansfield on your first ever election. In a pub car park, getting ready to deliver your first ever parliamentary election. That's the first time I believe.
We met in 2014 in the Newark by-election, because I was working out of a garage in Southall as a campaign manager at the time, and I'm sure I piled a load of leaflets into your arms at one point, Johnny. But yes, go back a while now.
Yeah. But no, I remember that election because Ben is. He'll never say this, but when it comes to the numbers of the elections, he's one of the best people that I know, and he can literally see 10% of an election and call it. And I believe you did that for the by-election, and you were speaking to the chief executive at the time, and you called the election. It was really interesting to see.
It's really interesting. I worked in that side of politics. I really enjoy it, actually, that kind of numbers and the campaigns and doing all the data. I'm a bit of a geek when it comes to that kind of stuff. So I'm quite a proud record. I worked in Sherwood in 2015, as you know. And we got to the end of the first part of the count and all of it, and kind of did the maths of what it was going to be, and got the numbers to within single figures of what votes were going to be, which is just one of those proud moments of geekery that nobody else appreciates except me. But I was quite pleased.
But politics is a maths game, and that's what people don't realise. It's a proper maths game. We obviously can't go into too many detail, but the systems we have available to us that will show us all the maths, show us who's going to vote what, or who intends to vote what. And it's about just, as you know, getting out there and trying to get out your vote. It's really interesting, the election period. How have you found it going from obviously local councillor to MP to now obviously you're leading back into the mayoral elections? How do you find it?
It swings and roundabouts, right? There are pros and cons to both. I really enjoy in the local stuff, and particularly now as a leader of the council, I've got levers and budgets, and I can change things, and things happen, and you can see things happen, although always under this kind of financial pressure of you can't always do all the things you would like to do from that perspective. Sometimes I've found Parliament frustrating in the sense you can talk until nobody here has to listen and nothing has to change, or from a resident's perspective, even as an MP, the stuff that comes across your desk is always that local stuff. It's the polls, it's the bin collections, it's the things that matter to me and my community. Whereas here, you know, it's the economy, it's Brexit, it's big kind of slightly abstract stuff in terms of people's lives. So it can be difficult to just point to that thing that you've done here when it's such a big conversation. So I find actually the balance of doing both really rewarding, because you can kind of line up the big stuff so it feeds into the little stuff and you can get outcomes out the other end, which is why you mentioned the mayoral stuff. It's kind of why I want to do that, right? Because you've got that national influence, but you've got the levers and the budgets to make a real difference, and that's why most of us get into it.
Yeah, that's super interesting. That's one of the main questions I think we want to talk about today, is sort of how you find that balance. But I think just for obviously a lot of people will know about your background and whatnot, but for those of you who don't, if we were to go back to sort of your beginnings in politics, I think it'd be interesting to hear a little bit about how you sort of fall into this career in the first place, or how it all begins for you.
Totally by accident, to be honest. I wanted to be a PE teacher. I never wanted to be a politician. Since I was at primary school, just on a sports nut, honestly. Like, that's all I've ever, when I was a kid, all I cared about. My kids are the same now. I went to university to do that and ended up dropping out, actually, which ironically was probably the best thing I ever did, because then met my wife and kind of got into this. So yeah, I was a landscape gardener. I worked at Frankie and Benny's. I worked at Aldi. I did all sorts of stuff. Recruitment, didn't really enjoy any of it. I went back to university and just kind of thought, so I was a mature student, and just kind of thought, well, what's vague enough that it's not going to kind of railroad me down a particular path? I'm interested in current affairs or watching news, you know, obviously politics. So I went back to university to do that, and it was really the kind of work experience, the stuff around that. I went to work for Mark Spencer for a couple of weeks on work experience, who's a neighbouring MP now and colleague, that kind of got me into it, and then fell out with the council about my bins, of all things. So there's always one thing that, you know, the reason you get into politics, that thing you were passionate about, for me it's wheelie bins. Which, you know, we've moved on since then, but basically the council didn't collect our bins at Christmas. And we had like a 6-month-old baby and nappies in the garden and all sorts of stuff. It was awful. So I went around the estate with all the little old ladies and kind of getting signatures on the petition. I had the grumpy photo on the front of the Hucknall Dispatch with my overflowing bin. Just decided, if you lot can't do it, I'm going to do it myself. And yeah, it was I laid the seat really forever that we weren't meant to win, same as then the Mansfield constituency later on, but we did win because people get really wound up about that local stuff that matters to them. So yeah, the rest is history, I suppose.
And you're completely right on that. I got involved in politics for roughly the same reason. I couldn't get a blue badge after losing my leg in Afghanistan. And what was the most surrealist thing I've ever had to do was about 6 months ago, when it all turned up again in the press, and I had to defend the council for not giving myself a blue badge. It was the most surrealist thing I've ever had to do. But no, you are completely right. Everybody gets involved in politics for the right reasons. I've never known, no matter who you are, Labour, Liberal, and Conservative, everybody gets involved in politics for the right reasons. And what I think is really strange, and people won't know until you're involved in it, is outside the change, everybody's really nice to each other.
For the most part, yeah, that's true. And you know, people talk about politicians, and I always ask them how many MPs they can name, because the truth is, when they talk about politicians, they're talking about the 10 people maybe, if you look at it, they actually see on the telly. There are 650 of us here, there are thousands of councillors around the country, you know, 99% of whom are in it for exactly the right reasons and work really hard. So there's always that bit of a stereotype, but they talk about colleagues here that, you know, nobody will have heard of, who've got some amazing stories. There's a guy here, Will Quince, who's an MP, I want to say Colchester, but that might be wrong, who got into politics because he and his wife lost a baby, and the reason he wanted to come was to change the support and the package that you get of help when you have that kind of bereavement, because they didn't get any, you know, he didn't get kind of leave from work or anything even. So he came here on that kind of, you know, mandate to try and change that. That was his drive, and now he's changed the law so that you get, you know, you get all this wraparound support, and you get you know, bereavement leave and things from work that you would never have got before. So, you know, just a really good example of, you know, somebody who had that experience and passionate about it and came and changed it, and that's, you know, the kind of stories that you don't often hear though in the media.
It's incredible. Yeah. Just off the back of that, then I think it'd be interesting to hear from you, Ben. Sort of, and maybe get an example of something locally and another example sort of nationally on a bigger scale. It doesn't have to be a specific policy, but something that sort of you're actively passionate about changing or working towards, in terms of, maybe one example sort of locally in the Mansfield area and East Midlands, and then nationally as well?
Yeah, I'm dead domestically kind of focused, right? Lots of people, I've got lots of colleagues here who are veterans, who are, have come from those kinds of backgrounds, who are really interested in foreign affairs and all the rest of it. To be honest, I've got no interest in any of that. I'm here because of my community and the places you want to change. And the local things you want to change. So, some of the most meaningful stuff I think in Mansfield and around our area, you probably won't see the outcomes from for a long time. One of the things, two things I'm most proud of locally. One is there's now a partnership between Nottingham Trent University and West Knox College in our constituency, where if you wanted to go to university as a kid from Mansfield, you had to leave, you probably never came back. Now they're delivering on-site in Mansfield, top-notch HG from a good university who's not set up some dodgy university of North Mansfield or whatever. It's a proper award-winning university, roots into local careers, and that started, those conversations, that partnership started from a group that I set up when I was first elected, like an education steering group to try and improve local standards. I wanted to be a teacher, that's my kind of background. So that's amazing, and that will change lives for kids in Mansfield and open up opportunities. And the other one in a similar vein is we've talked about this at the council a lot, Step Fusion, right? This massive clean energy investment, 20 billion quid, which is in Bassett Law strictly speaking, but it's regional and national impact, which will be 1,500 jobs in clean energy and fusion technology, nuclear technology, the kind of jobs that kids in Mansfield haven't had access to. And that's a 20-year, 30-year project to all be built and to all come to conclusion. But they're already starting to put the courses and the skills in now to help train that next generation of workforce. And again, that's the level of opportunity and kind of aspiration that a lot of kids from a pit estate in Mansfield would never have had or known about. So they're really exciting and tangible local things, right? The only challenge we find locally, I'm sure you find the same, John, is when that is a 20-year project. People want outcomes they want now, right? So you've got to try and justify the short-term stuff as well.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
Yeah, I find now with the internet, everybody wants responses yesterday. If you wait 20 minutes, half an hour to reply to somebody's text message or Facebook post, they message them why have you not replied back? It's really interesting that people do want things yesterday. So obviously we're in London today, we're walking through, and obviously a few years ago we had an attack and a terrorist attack in London. You're a young MP. How do you find the security yourself? Because I know that you've had some issues on social media and with locals. How do you find that as a young dad, really?
It can be a challenge. I said, before we started recording, I was saying that one of the things that gets me the most abuse is football, actually. Can you believe? Are you a Forest fan? Are you a Mansfield fan? You can't be both. Then loads of, I've had liberal use of the block button since I went to the Stags game at the weekend. But no, down here is a different world, really. I have to say, and guys in my office here will agree, I tend to kind of run off north as soon as I can. I've got young kids, I like being at home, and really, it's that local stuff that got me into it. It's what I'm here for. But it can be challenging in that sense. You pointed to stuff that's gone on in the past. There was a time a few years ago when I was first elected. One of those seats that was kind of iconic in the sense that we only won, I think, 5 seats in 2017. Mansfield's won. That kind of start of the conversation about the red wall and this different kind of demographic. So I was quite high profile when I was first elected and got a lot of stick to the extent where somebody threatened to kidnap my wife at one point, which was pretty awful. Police went and knocked on his door, and it turns out it was some teenage kid living with his mum who burst into tears when he realised that there were actually real world consequences to saying this kind of stuff. So it can be not fun. I think the worst example of that has been, I have been known to occasionally say stupid things, usually by accident, but no benefit of the doubt in this game is there either. And when I was first promoted, I was one of the first people to be promoted from my intake in 2017, and the second you gain that profile, every journalist on the sun is digging into everything you've ever said, every tweet you've ever posted, and all sorts came up from when I was a teenager, which led to the Daily Mail camping outside my terminally ill granddad's house, stick a microphone in his face and ask him whether he was ashamed of me, which was pretty impressive levels to stoop to, I thought. But that was dead early in my career, and it kind of almost makes you think like, what have I got myself into here? You know, do I really want to be here? But, you know, it's rewarding in equal measure, and you'll know from, you know, local bits, when you can fix things for people, when you can change things and point to some of those projects that we just touched on, you know, makes it all worthwhile, doesn't it?
Yeah, I don't think people realise like the level that the press can go to. Not everybody, they're not all the same. But we were at a conference, and it's happened to a few of my colleagues. Is somebody will just come, sit down and have a chat with you. Oh, how's it going? They're a journalist, they are recording that conversation, and you're expected to know. And we had it to us in conference this year, and we've had it to a colleague. And if you're not careful, they do try and catch you out.
Yeah. Just come and sit down and say, how do you think it's all going? And then you say something negative, and it's printed in the paper the next day. But I mean, you live and learn, right, with this stuff. And I think particularly now, you know, one of the things I've learned over the time I've been here is when you first get here, you're encouraged to do everything, to get involved in every issue, every discussion, you know, put yourself out there. Actually, you can't really get anything done if you spread yourself too thin. So I've kind of learned, I guess, to be really focused on the things that I work on. So I know when that journalist texts me now and says, do you want to comment on this? I kind of go, well, is it relevant to the priorities that I work on? Which tends to be that local, the regeneration stuff, regional economy, transport and skills in the mayoral kind of conversation, and also young people and education. They're the things that I really kind of focus on. Is it relevant to that? Is it going to help me? If not, I'll just ignore it. It's not worth it, is it? Whereas I guess when you first start, you feel like you're almost like beholden to the journalist sometimes. They want a quote and you feel like you've got to give them one. Actually, you don't. You can just kind of ignore it, and it takes a while to learn that.
Yeah.
So when I was at conference, I spoke to somebody that you might know, Jacob Rees-Mogg, and I told him I work for you. And the one thing he said is you need to wear a tie, but I admire your tie collection there. He would be very impressed.
It was noted that they're all folded on my desk rather than around my neck. I do have a vast collection of ties that I rarely wear, but I found now, more recently, the speaker here has started kind of being a bit more rigorous about it. So the previous one, actually, ironically, as much as he was a pain in the arse, Berko, kind of let me get away with it. Whereas the latest one is not keen. So I found we do these statements, you kind of have to bob up and down to get called, and I was literally last to be called, about 7 statements in a row, to the point where I went and said, look, is this because of the tie? And it was. So if I go in the chamber now, I'll put one on.
Brilliant. Yeah, I just want to ask Ben to touch on something you mentioned earlier about sort of like family life and stuff like that. And I'd be keen to know from someone who doesn't really have any sort of tie or connection to politics at all. As an individual, how do you sort of switch off from it? And because it is such an intense job, and I know Jono closely, and he's told me about sort of how stressful it can be. How do you then, sort of when you get home, be a dad and a husband, and is that difficult? I imagine it is.
Yeah, it can be. I know it winds my wife up sometimes when you know, you're at home but you're not because your head's somewhere else, or you're like messaging, or you're doing your emails or whatever on your phone. And I wind myself up sometimes because you end up in a place like that, you know, where your kids are trying to talk to you or whatever, and you're just kind of like, I've got stuff to do, which is no good. So again, you know, over time I've kind of learned to draw those lines a bit better. It winds some colleagues up because I'll go, right, no, it's Sunday actually. And you know, I still do loads of sport. I was reffing the under-10s football last week. I coached hockey on a Sunday. So I kind of draw that line. I'll sit up till 11 o'clock on a Friday night to get everything done and boxed off, so that I can have more of a weekend. And I still end up doing things over the weekend as well, or events or whatever, but it just means I can go to the kids' football and I can do the coaching on the Sunday, and I can kind of draw those clear lines that just say, yeah, I'm not working at this point in time, which, you know, you could literally work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week and not touch the sides of all the things that go on in this place and all the different issues. So like I say, you just got to focus and draw those lines. It does mean that, you know, people will come and say, can you come and speak at this dinner, or can you come to this community event? And I have to say, like, sorry, I'm going to my kids' football, which, you know, can annoy some people, but, you know, you've got to get that balance.
100%, yeah, and I can imagine setting those boundaries are quite important, and yeah, it sounds like that's something you've had to sort of realise over time, I guess, and from experience. And
yeah, you throw yourself in at the beginning, right, and rightly so, because you've just been elected and you want to show that willing, and you want to be part of it, and you want to meet people, and still do, but then, you know, you've also got to balance your own family. It's not, you know, you've got to be fair to wife and kids as well. You've got to balance your own kind of well-being in that sense. You can't, if you just spread yourself too thin, or you just end up knackered and you know, you lose your enthusiasm for it, and you're not helping anybody either. So try and draw those lines. It can be hard because, I mean, you get messages all the time saying, oh, can you just donate to this fundraiser? Can you just come to this event? And you have to sometimes just go, well, as a rule, no, I can't, because if I do it for you, I've got to do it for everybody, and I can't be at everything all the time. So yeah, sometimes people either get it or they don't, right?
Yeah.
But I've also, and this probably sounds awful, but like to a certain extent, I've also learned to be a bit more comfortable in just being myself, right? And if people vote for me, they vote for me, and if they don't, they don't. I'm not gonna kind of bend over backwards in some ways, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because you can just end up digging yourself into a hole, or setting an expectation that you can't meet. So I tend just to be upfront with people, and I've got better. I think it might be better, it might be worse, at just sending those quite blunt emails back, just going, you know what, you're kind of expecting too much from me here, I can't do that, and just trying to be honest about it with people who either appreciate it or they don't.
Yeah, and I think you get to the point. I think I've just got to that stage in local politics. Who's like saying, when you're like, well, I've been around 8 years now. I know what I can achieve and what I can't achieve, and I don't need to win votes. If you vote for me, great. If you don't, then you don't.
The worst thing is when you kind of pretend that you can sort things out. And I know lots of colleagues fall foul of this, right? And I'm in a slightly different place because I am the leader of the council, so I've got a bit more clout on certain issues. But roads is a really good example. I could turn around tomorrow and say, yes, I can sort the roads out because I've got those levers, I've got whatever, I'll fix it. Truth be told, can't. I ain't got the budget, and it's 3,000 miles of road. Even if I did have the budget, it'd take me 10 years to do it. So there's no point, and I may as well just be honest and just say, look, it's really difficult and complicated. I spend a lot more time now having that conversation about, like, if there were easy answers to this issue or that issue, would have done it. There aren't, and that's why it's a difficult process or conversation. And as I say, people either kind of listen and understand that, or often people just want instant results for things that you can't do. But better to be upfront about it, I think.
But the wheels of local politics is very slow.
No, it's ridiculous.
The one thing I was told by a very good friend of mine is, you will take credit for your predecessor's work, and whoever replaces you will take credit for your work, because politics takes that long. And to be fair, I don't think he's wrong, to be fair. But leading on to this, obviously you've just been selected as the mayoral candidate. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Obviously, I know you quite well, and I know that you've argued that there needs to be that link between national policy and local policy. Would you like to explain that?
Yeah, so the East Midlands, or Derbyshire and Nottinghamshire, effectively is getting like a regional or metro mayor. They've been called in other places. Andy Street, Andy Burnham are good examples, Ben Houchin in Teesside. And what that's done in those places, in Birmingham, in Manchester and Teesside, has kind of been that conduit between local councils and politics and government influence, but also business and investors and the private sector. And as a region in the East Midlands, we really struggled with that because, even in Derbyshire and Nottinghamshire, I think there's 17 or 18 local councils. Somebody wants to come and invest in our area, 18 different leaders put their hands up and say, do it here in my project. We all squabble about which is the best place for it to go, and so inevitably they go and invest somewhere else because it's too difficult. We haven't got a clear set of regional priorities, and we've seen with the transport announcements in this last week, the Prime Minister said, right, £1.5 billion for transport priorities in our region. That's fantastic. But we haven't got a list of priorities because 18 different councils have got 18 different projects that they want to spend it on. So unless you can have a coherent message, and you've got somebody like those regional mayors in other places who can go to government and say, on that big ticket stuff that's not just this constituency or this local council, big regional impact or national impact, this is what we want. And I've got some clout in that role to deliver some of it up to a point, then I just think you can get more done. And those places, Manchester in particular, has benefited by about over £6 billion more than we've had as a region in the East Midlands since they've had that regional mayor. So it's big money, and when it comes to lots of projects, transport projects in particular, or economic development investment in major projects, the Broadmarsh in Nottingham is a really good example. Local councils cannot get the investors interested in the proposition. The city council made a mess of the city's economy, so people don't want to put their money in there, right? But actually, with a different set of powers, a different set of relationships with investors, you can fix that and you can move it forward.
And I think you made a good point. The Labour City Council have made a complete mess of their,
we would say that,
finances. So explain, obviously I know a little bit more, but explain the mayoral structure. What sort of resources, what of what are you taking over? So if you were elected tomorrow, what is your job as?
Yeah, so it's built around some core things. So transport in particular, and you've got some really good examples. One thing Nottingham does have that is good is a good transport system, good bus system, tram. Most of the region doesn't have that. And how you kind of level that up, to coin a phrase, how you fill the gaps, how you make sure people in rural villages have got connectivity. And also in that space, you know, some of the rail projects, some of the, you know, tram extensions, things we've talked about for a long time. We've never had the money. Well, in the future we'll have funding and decision-making power over those things. Skills, adult skills in particular, retraining, so where we've got gaps in our workforce, where we've got local jobs that we've not quite got the right skills for, or we've got new sectors like we talked about, step fusion for clean energy. How do we create those kind of workforces? So clout in that kind of space. And then things like economic development, so major projects. We've got loads, whether it's STEP at West Burton, whether it's Brackley-on-Soar Power Station, Freeport, which is incentives to invest in our part of the world, or kind of flagship things like the Broadmarsh, where it just needs resetting and it needs a bit more of a commercial, a private sector view of what's actually viable there, because I don't think the plans that the City Council have come up with are ever actually going to make any money back for an investor, and if it doesn't, they're never going to invest in it. So some of the things I think we can tackle, but it can go much wider than that, and you've seen it in Manchester in particular, where over time things that they've been interested in, they've been able to add to. So I'm really interested in young people, in sport, in those kind of early intervention prevention services that keep people out of care and keep, you know, that's what we do at the council, right? So I'd love to get into a space of getting more clout and more funding from government around sports facilities and physical activity, around youth services, and around being able to kind of embed that kind of stuff in more communities, particularly that haven't got it right now, because there's loads of cold spots where people just can't access services. So it's really wide scope, which is why it's quite exciting, right? Because there's loads of extra cash, literally billions of pounds to invest in some really exciting things.
And I think it's fair to say that if it wasn't for you, this wouldn't be here. We wouldn't be having this discussion. You've been arguing this for a long time, that there needs to be that linking between local and national.
Yeah, well, that's kind of where I've ended up. So being the MP and the council leader is almost the alternative. Where we haven't got a mayor, I've ended up kind of doing it, and being that conduit between the two, for Nottinghamshire in particular, although this obviously will go across Derbyshire as well. And it's worked. The actual devolution deal is probably the best example of where it's worked, in the sense of we've been trying to do that. We've been trying to get one of these roles, these regional mayors, for a decade. We've never been able to do it because it's too complicated, too many politicians with too many different views who won't agree. So actually building the relationships and then being able to come here, talk to the Secretary of State and get the legislation, and we're literally passing the legislation today to make it happen, which is exciting. And I mean, it's a mad story, but we got to the day before we were due to announce that we'd done this big deal to get all this extra money, and I got a call at 9 o'clock in the morning saying it's not happening anymore. They can't get it all over the line within different departments. All these decisions haven't been made. Yeah, but it's mad, and it's only for the fact that obviously in my role I've got all the mobile numbers of all those ministers and special advisors in those departments. Spent the entire day on the phone. Right, Treasury have got to decide this. Right, get on the phone to Treasury. Okay, they've sorted that. Now DfT need to do this step in transport. Okay, I'll get on the phone to them. And by about 6:30, we've managed to filter it all the way through the system so we could do it the following day. You know, and they're the kind of examples where, you know, if it weren't for the fact you're in both places, it just wouldn't be happening. And we're already on the hook for, you know, getting on 3 billion quid of extra cash that we wouldn't be having. So, you know, hopefully it makes a difference from that point of view.
Would you say that's your biggest achievement in Parliament, really? If you're able to get this across the board and get it
well, I mean, certainly, probably, along with the step fusion stuff and the jobs, that I think it's probably the biggest long-term change and influence. You know, whether it makes the difference I would want it to make depends on who we elect and whether they have the same views as me, or whether it's me, of course. So we'll see, but it certainly is a huge opportunity for us, and something I think where, you know, we talk a lot about projects. You know, we've got a Freeport that is a set of incentives. We've got this devolution deal. They're all vehicles to change things, right? That having a mayor is not an outcome in itself. It doesn't matter really. It's what the mayor has the clout and the funding to deliver. And if we get those new train lines and those new bypasses and those new jobs, then it will be, you know, it'll be amazing.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, should we go to football at the end?
Yeah, we can finish with some
football.
more footy talk if you like.
Unless there's anything Do you want to say, Ben, anything you want to add in?
I'm happy, Jono. I'll talk about whatever.
Yeah.
I did go to, we chatted before about Stags Notts County at the weekend, which was
I was going to say it would be good to chat about that a little bit. I think. All right. We're still rolling, so I can cut some of this out. But we'll just chat a little bit then about bringing it back to where we started. I guess it's sort of full circle back to football. Then the reason I'm here, of course. Now you went to the game of the weekend.
Oh.
What a shock result that was.
Great. I went with Lee Anderson, who is Ashfield, Huthwaite, born and bred, Mansfield Town, kind of season ticket holder, and Brendan Clark-Smith, who is from Clifton and is a Notts County fan.
Wow.
And it was tricky relationships. We went our separate ways as we went in.
I was going to say, how does the seating arrangement work with that sort of situation? Yeah.
Couldn't sit next to each other. But it was great. A tense game at half time, and actually, we just blew them away in the second half. It was amazing.
Well, all the goals came in like last quarter, right?
Yeah, last kind of 20 minutes, which is amazing. But I'm a Forest fan. I've always been, but I've kind of followed Mansfield obviously since I've been the MP, and good relationship with the club. Want them to do really well, and actually, just like Forest being in the Premier League, Mansfield getting promoted will be massive for the town. Extra supporters, the money they spend in the town centre, hotels and things like that. That what it does for the town's economy will be huge. So I'm dead keen for them to do it, and they've been so close like every year for years and years and years. Maybe this is the one, but if they and Notts County could both go up this year, I mean, how good would that be for the city and the county?
Well, I love that. For me, I'm a Bolton fan, so it means I could have two really close away days if they're playing Bolton actually. So.
I think when you look at the numbers that these teams, I mean, especially obviously Forest now being back in the Premier League, but even Mansfield and Notts County, the numbers of fans and supporters that flood in to watch them play every weekend.
There's nearly 17,000 in League Two.
That's brilliant, isn't it? That's incredible, and that does just show how sort of important and crucial it is to keep sort of like the buzz for football alive in the East Midlands. And if these two teams can sort of climb back into the top flight or get somewhere around there,
we've got to use it as well. To a certain extent, back to the politics a bit, but if one of the opportunities of extra capital investment, and if you want to focus on both the economy around sport, right, and the stuff I've just talked about, but also the facilities and the stadiums and the grassroots pitches and all the stuff that's really important. How great would it be to help them expand Meadow Lane, to help rebuild the stand at Mansfield Town, to help invest in Forest and make it something amazing, right? And to get more out of that kind of sporting capital that we've got. We've got amazing history, amazing teams and clubs and supporters. I'd love for us to make more of it, kind of for the area as a whole.
Yeah.
Because it's so close to the heart of communities, isn't it, from that point of view?
And that's interesting. It brings me on to the next point I want to talk about is the potential of using especially the City Ground at the moment, especially because of the facilities there and how big the stadium is for sort of other events. There's to take that concert that's just been booked in there.
Exciting.
There's the potential Lee Wood next fight. If you saw the Josh Roington fight, like obviously that sets up a potential fight for him at the City Ground, and that's really been pretty much unheard of for as long as I've been alive and living in the Nottingham area, to have other events taking place at the City Ground that aren't Forest playing. But it's fantastic, isn't it? I think that's incredible.
Yeah, just visitor economy, isn't it? We've got so many assets. If you go anywhere around the world, right, what people know about Nottingham, probably Forest and Robin Hood, right? And we've never historically made everything out of that we could in terms of investing it into the region, in terms of the jobs and the opportunities that it attracts, or just cool stuff to go and do, right? And take that at the City Ground, I imagine would be pretty good, although I'm not a massive Take That fan.
Yeah,
I can imagine you right at the front with your free ticket,
the karaoke,
screaming.
Yeah, and they would have a good time. And even the Lee Wood fight, like you say, that'd be massive for him in that hometown. Kind of, I got a picture of me and Carl Froch on our wall in the office. There's some brilliant kind of memories of all of that. So it should be what an experience for him and for everybody to be able to go and see it. So yeah, mega. And the more they can make of it, the better. But that's the opportunity, right? That if you can have those stadiums that are, almost the hub of things, that you then wrap everything else around, like the grassroots sport, the youth sport, all the community work that they do. Those clubs can make a massive difference. So that's one of the things I really like to help with and invest in, actually.
Yeah, and it's not even mentioning Trent Bridge, like right over there as well, and that as well.
Panthers, we've got the National Water Sports Centre, we've got
Panthers.
loads of stuff.
Who are Forest playing this weekend?
Luton at home.
Yeah.
So the big question is, what's the score going to be, man?
We need to be winning that, don't we?
2-0, 3-0.
Yeah.
I reckon.
Really?
Can't beat Luton at home.
You're doing well though. You made table.
Mid-table.
Yeah, you made table.
I reckon I'm going 12th or 13th this year.
Okay.
What have you made to the start of the season so far? Because it's split opinion a little bit, hasn't it? Because obviously it was another summer where there was a lot of players coming in.
It seems to make more sense this time though. So like, I mean, you can't knock last summer because it worked, didn't it? It stayed up.
Yeah.
But for every decent player you brought in a total flop as well.
Yeah.
Whereas it seems to be more targeted this year, and actually everybody they've brought in is an upgrade, right?
Yeah.
Which is great. And you've almost ended up in a place where, you know, some of those lads who've been there a long time. We started the season with Worrell and McKenna at centre back, and they're kind of fourth and fifth choice really right now. Like, such is the quality that you've brought in.
It's funny. I bump into Joe Roll because he shops at the M&S, and I bump into, and he's like he's lovely, and what he's done. He's been such a great servant at the club and the city.
He shops at the M&S in Newark.
What? No, right, but he shops at an M&S somewhere in the East Midlands. Yeah, But yeah, like you said, it was weird, wasn't it? It was that sort of thing, and it's what Man United are doing now, where they've been out and spent all this money on recruitment, but yet you look at this sort of, and it's still Johnny Evans and Harry Maguire starting at centre back. You know, well, how's this happened when we've spent all this money? And it was the same to start for the season with Forest, but I think you're right. It seems the recruitment seems more targeted and structured this time around. Players like Murillo seem really exciting, and
I'm glad they're still there though, because I personally I think that Hudson-Odoi and Elanga are an upgrade on Brennan Johnson, but you still want that local, the local kids, the Nottingham kids, and there's only really Worrell and Yatesy left, not there.
Yeah.
So I'm glad they're still in and around it, because that's really important.
Massively, and more just under contract, which was huge, really. Yeah, and he's just a leader, isn't he? He's a born leader, so it's great to have him around the club. So yeah, exciting times. I think still part of like a building process. Going to be a few years yet.
All you want is just to not be in the relegation scrap this year, right? And then you've made progress and you can build on it again, can't you? But the owner seems they're keen to invest. And to support it long term. So.
He deserves a fair bit of credit, I feel like, as well, doesn't he, for sticking with Cooper last year when he was under the cosh a little bit and put more money into the club, like you say, and it seems to be onwards and upwards.
It's my main escape from work, right? And my you're peak dad times now, where I haven't been able to go for years and years and years, because it's like I'm ditching the kids and I'm doing football. Now my oldest loves it. He's a massive Forest fan, so we go together, right? So I'm not ditching him anymore. It's parent time.
That's best of both, isn't it? Where
Exactly.
he enjoys it just as much.
So it's mega. But I keep trying to explain to him that like his first game was, I think it was Fulham at home. It was Houghton's last game before he got sacked, and it's just been like this massive upward trajectory since then. I keep trying to explain to him it's not normally like this. Shouldn't expect it to continue forever.
Yeah, he's kind of grown up with us just like on the ascend, hasn't he? It's been perfect.
And what's your half-time treat? What do you have at half-time?
Well, see, we tend to stop at the shop on the way in, to be honest, John, and get the snacks. So I've normally got some Revels or something in the pocket.
Nice.
Harley likes the squashies. He shares them with all the people we sit with, which always goes down.
It's not a great for a club that's like on the up and everything. They haven't really upgraded like the refreshment. It's still Pucker pies and Bovril and whatnot, isn't it?
You do like a Bovril.
Yeah. Bovril and
this time of year as well, especially. Like I'll go for a Bovril, but
I look up there.
Oh, amazing! You got it to go. Nice.
We're on it.
Yeah, but no, they're still like pretty much like the same as it's been for as long as I've been going. To be fair, Pucker pies.
Yeah. Well, when they redo that stand, maybe we'll get fancy cuisine.
Yeah, that would be nice.
Well, I'm going to bring this I'm going to bring this podcast to an end, because I know Ben's got lots and lots of work to do. And thank you very much for having us in your office, man.